Hi there, I'm Dar. On my 34th birthday, my parents handed me a silver envelope. Not a card, not a blessing, but eviction papers. One minute I was surrounded by balloons and birthday cake, the next, by silence and betrayal. You think you know your family until they lock you out of the home you built with your own hands. Why would someone celebrate your downfall like a party? Tell me, have you ever trusted someone who ended up taking everything? The scent of jasmine floated on the soft Charleston breeze, weaving through the pastel balloons strung across the backyard. The sun hung low, casting a golden glaze over the birthday banner that read, "Happy 34th Dar." I stepped through the garden gate, my heels crunching lightly on the gravel path I had laid myself the summer before. The scene looked perfect, perfectly staged. Smiling faces turned toward me, and somewhere to my left, my brother Lyle shifted uncomfortably, his hands buried deep in his pockets. I caught the brief dart of his eyes, avoiding mine. A strange tightness squeezed my chest, but I swallowed it down. This was supposed to be my day. My mother approached with a silver-wrapped envelope cradled carefully in both hands, the way someone might present a crown. Her smile was brittle, stretched too wide. "Open it, sweetheart," she urged, her voice syrupy and false. I laughed nervously, brushing a stray curl behind my ear, and took the envelope. It was heavier than it looked, its weight settling into my palms like a stone. The seal popped with an almost ceremonial rip. Inside wasn't a birthday card. It was a legal eviction notice. I blinked, the words swimming in front of me, impossible and stark against the delicate stationery. An odd roaring filled my ears. I looked up, but no one rushed forward. No one gasped. No one seemed surprised. My mother's hands trembled slightly at her sides. My father stared resolutely at the hedge line. I turned in a slow circle, seeing everything and nothing at once. The pastel streamers, the careful decorations, the neighbors chatting over punch. The betrayal was deliberate, planned. They had chosen today, my birthday. I clutched the papers tighter as I stumbled back a step. Laughter floated toward me from the patio, bright and jarring against the cold stone settling in my gut. Memories flooded up, unbidden and cruel, me scrubbing the kitchen tiles on my hands and knees, repainting the front porch in the sticky summer heat, spending every extra penny repairing this house, my house, the same house they were now kicking me out of. Sweat prickled the back of my neck. My palms were damp, the paper slipping slightly between my fingers. I could hear someone clinking glasses together in a toast, the sound sharp and unbearable. I tried to smile. It cracked across my face like thin ice. My heart thundered so loudly I barely noticed the quiet tightening around me, the way conversations faltered, glances slid away, bodies shifted to form a casual wall between me and them. I dropped the eviction notice onto the nearest table, letting it flutter down like a white flag of surrender no one asked for. The breeze caught it, making it flap weakly against the pink tablecloth, an ugly, undeniable truth among all the pretty lies. I scanned the crowd one last time, the friends, the family, the people I had trusted, and realized they were smiling at me, but not for me. Not anymore. I took a shaky step back, the ground unsteady beneath my feet, and understood. Whatever family I thought I had ended the moment I tore open that envelope. The silver edges of the eviction notice fluttered in the breeze, but I stood frozen, rooted to the ground among the pastel decorations and wilting balloons. Laughter tinkled from somewhere behind me, soft and oblivious, as glasses clinked together in lazy toasts. They celebrated, indifferent to the crater opening under my feet. The weight of the paper in my hands grew heavier with each heartbeat. I couldn't hear what people were saying. Their mouths moved, but the words melted away, swallowed by the roar inside my ears. For a moment, I thought if I closed my eyes and reopened them, this nightmare would evaporate into spring air. But when I blinked, the betrayal was still there, wrapped in ribbons and pastel lies. I needed answers. Answers no one seemed willing to offer. I stumbled through the crowd, feeling the way a ghost must feel when drifting through rooms filled with the living. In the kitchen, my mother stood at the counter humming tunelessly as she refilled a pitcher of lemonade. Her hands moved automatically, her back rigid, as if sensing my presence but refusing to turn around. "Who gave me this?" I asked, my voice so raw I barely recognized it. The pitcher clinked against the glass as she set it down too hard. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, still not facing me. After a long moment, she glanced out the window toward the driveway. The answer wasn't in her words, but in her silence. I spun on my heel, heart hammering against my ribs. Out on the gravel driveway, a woman removed a shiny badge from her blouse and tucked it into her purse. She moved quickly, almost furtively, as if hoping to escape unnoticed. My breath caught. It was Mara, childhood best friend, keeper of my secrets. The girl who taught me how to French braid my hair and swore we'd live next door to each other forever. I called her name, but she kept her head down, walking faster. My legs carried me forward before my mind caught up, the gravel crunching underfoot. I caught up just as she opened her car door. "Mara," I said, voice shaking. "Was it you?" She stiffened, then turned halfway, just enough for me to see her face. Her expression was unfamiliar, closed, guarded. Not the Mara who cried when we graduated high school. Not the Mara who once held my hand through my first heartbreak. "It's just paperwork, Dar," she said, voice flat. "Just paperwork." My vision blurred at the edges. I wanted to scream, to yank the badge from her purse and hurl it across the lawn, but I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there as Mara slid into her car, started the engine, and drove away without a backward glance. The world narrowed to the feeling of the eviction notice crumpling in my fist. Losing a house was one thing. Losing a home, that cut deeper. But losing the people who were supposed to be my foundation, my family, my best friend, that felt like drowning in plain sight, with everyone pretending not to see. I wanted to rage. I wanted to sob. I wanted to tear down every pastel streamer fluttering in the spring breeze. But instead, I turned the devastation inward, packing it neatly into a box somewhere deep in my chest. A box I would open later, when it was safe, when I could afford to feel. For now, I needed something else. I needed a plan. I needed to remember that this house, this fight, wasn't just about bricks and wood. It was about every scraped knee, every Christmas morning, every whispered secret on the back porch. I clutched the notice tighter and turned back toward the backyard. The party had resumed without me, laughter spilling over the hedges, sickly sweet. Mara's taillights disappeared down the road, the sun glinting mockingly off the silver badge on her dashboard. I stepped back into the yard, expressionless, the eviction notice tucked under my arm like armor. They thought they could break me. They forgot who built this house with her bare hands. 3 days passed, each one colder than the last. The spring rain had started that morning, soft and steady, threading between the houses like a ghost. I sat parked at the curb, staring at the place that used to be home, the windshield wipers clicking a slow, mournful rhythm. No calls came, no apologies, not even a text asking if I was okay. When the rain eased into a mist, I made my way toward the front door. The house looked the same from the outside, paint fresh, shutters neatly hung. But the closer I got, the more foreign it felt. Like someone had repainted it with invisible ink, erasing the memories only I could see. Under the porch lamp, I knelt down, reaching automatically for the spare key tucked behind the loose brick. It wasn't there. A hollow feeling opened inside my chest. Maybe it had fallen? I scraped my fingers along the brick, searching, scraping my knuckles raw. Nothing. Inside, through the fogged window, I could see lights on, shadows moving. My family, living their lives without me. I knocked once, twice. No one answered. The pit in my stomach grew. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and turned away, my footsteps heavy on the soaked wood steps. Later that evening, after too many cups of bitter coffee and too much silence, I called my mother. I kept my voice even, casual, like I wasn't dying inside. "Did you move the spare key?" I asked. There was a pause, a heavy, telling pause. "Oh, honey," she said, too bright. "Carol needed it. She wanted to measure the windows for new curtains." Curtains. The house was barely cold, and they were already redecorating. I hung up before she could say more, staring at the blank screen of my phone as if it could offer an answer that made sense. It was still raining when I tried the front door again. Still locked. I pulled my key from my pocket, the one I had used 100 times before, the one that used to click smoothly into the brass lock with a soft, familiar snick. The key didn't fit. At first, I thought it was the rain making my hands clumsy. I wiped my palms on my jeans and tried again. Harder. Nothing. Panic prickled the back of my neck. My breathing grew shallow. I tried the back door, the garage, every lock I could reach. All changed. I pounded on the door, fists striking the wood that I had sanded and painted myself. Rain soaked through my jacket, dripping from my hair into my eyes. I was locked out of my own home. I pressed my forehead against the door, cold seeping into my bones. How easy it had been for them to erase me. How simple to change a lock and pretend I had never lived there. The house glowed behind the frosted glass, warm and golden, as if inviting someone else inside. Someone who belonged, not me. I stumbled back to my truck, peeling off my wet jacket and tossing it onto the passenger seat. The engine hummed to life, but I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the house through the blurred windshield, heart hammering against my ribs. The memories flickered unbidden. Me sanding those doors in the heat of a South Carolina summer. My father handing me nails while I built the new steps. Laughter, dinners, holidays, every small piece that made that house a home. All of it, locked behind a door I no longer had the right to open. A pair of headlights cut through the rain, angling into the driveway. Carol's SUV. She stepped out under a giant umbrella, laughing into her phone as if the world was exactly as it should be. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. If they locked me out, then they better be ready for when I find my way back in. The sun dipped low, throwing long shadows across the damp sidewalk as I sat in my truck across the street, engine off, heart hammering. A handful of cars lined the curb outside my house. My house, the one I couldn't even step into now. Balloons bobbed in the warm air, pastel streamers twisting lazily from the porch rails. The faint hum of music floated toward me, syrupy and cruel. A neighbor jogged by with his dog, giving me a friendly wave. Big family gathering, huh? Looks like a real celebration. I nodded stiffly, biting the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. They didn't even bother hiding it. I leaned back against the seat, staring at the house like it was a museum exhibit I was no longer allowed to touch. Bright paper lanterns swung in the breeze. Someone had set up a barbecue in the backyard. I could almost smell the charcoal smoke, hear the pop of soda cans cracking open. I didn't need to knock on the door to know I wasn't welcome. I checked my mailbox just in case. Empty. No invitation. No apology note slipped through the cracks. Back in the truck, I scrolled through my phone with mechanical detachment. It didn't take long. Photos flooded my feed. Smiling faces gathered under the old oak tree, champagne glasses raised high. There was Carol, front and center, radiant and triumphant. My mother stood beside her, beaming like she had won the lottery. My father, arms crossed proudly over his chest. My chest tightened. Twist after twist of the knife. In one photo, I spotted the cake, its frosting melting slightly in the southern heat. Pink and gold, piped with careful cursive. "Congratulations, Carol!" I zoomed in. The steps behind the cake, the ones I rebuilt after the hurricane 3 years ago. The shutters painted by my own hand. My house, scrubbed clean of me. I closed my eyes, letting the phone drop onto the passenger seat. It wasn't just that they celebrated without me. It was that they celebrated because I wasn't there. The final, gleaming twist of the blade came when I spotted the centerpiece on the buffet table. My grandmother's music box. The one Carol had sold without a second thought. Polished now, gleaming under fairy lights, as if it had never belonged to anyone but her. My fingers curled into fists. A memory flickered. Me, no more than 8, setting the dinner table carefully for Thanksgiving, smoothing out every wrinkle in the cloth, because maybe if I did it perfectly, they'd see me. They never did. And maybe they never would. The family I loved never existed outside the fragile stories I told myself to survive. I watched as a group clinked glasses together, their laughter spilling out into the twilight, staining everything it touched. They had erased me so easily, with such casual cruelty, as if I were nothing more than a stain to scrub away. I picked up my phone, thumb hovering over the call button, wanting to scream into the receiver, to demand answers, to reclaim something, anything. Instead, I powered it off. The pictures vanished into darkness. "You can only be erased if you stay silent," I whispered to the empty truck. I shoved the key into the ignition, headlights cutting through the thickening dusk. My hands were steady on the wheel now. My path was clear. They wanted me gone. They forgot who taught me how to rebuild from nothing. The azaleas were in full bloom, their colors garish against the growing hollowness of the house. I moved slowly through the yard, the soles of my shoes brushing over gravel that somehow sounded too loud, too sharp. Something was missing. Not just the usual comfort of home, but pieces of it, carved away like someone had started dismantling my life board by board. The old rocking chair was gone from the porch, so was the wind chime I had made with my grandmother, once strung carefully between two posts. The empty spaces shouted louder than any words. Inside, the air was cool and stale. A smell like dust and faded memories clung to every surface. I glanced around, a growing unease coiling low in my stomach. My fingers skimmed the mantel, tracing the bare space where a small music box used to sit. It was gone. Panic prickled under my skin. I called my mother, my hand trembling around the phone. "Where's Grandma's music box?" I asked, trying to keep the crack out of my voice. On the other end, there was a hesitation thick enough to feel. "Oh," she said finally. "Carol thought it was outdated junk. We donated it." The line buzzed as she hurried to change the subject, but the words stuck to me like burrs. Outdated junk. I ended the call without another word. I needed air. I needed proof I wasn't losing my mind. Sitting in my truck, I pulled up the community event page out of habit. And there it was, a post from the weekend. A smiling Carol handing over a polished, gleaming music box to a real estate investor. The caption gushing about preserving family heritage. Zooming in, my chest squeezed tight. It was my grandmother's music box. The intricate floral design, the small chip on the underside where I had dropped it once as a child. It was unmistakable. Carol had taken my memories, scrubbed my name from them, and rebranded them as her own legacy. I sat there staring at the screen until the world blurred around the edges. It wasn't just the house anymore. They had taken my roots, my stories, my right to exist within the very walls I had rebuilt. The ache was too big to fit inside my chest, so it spilled over into my hands, making them shake, into my throat, burning behind my teeth. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, letting the grief come in slow, silent waves. They hadn't just locked me out, they had erased me. When the shaking subsided, I sat back up. The sky outside had darkened, the cool air thick with the scent of rain coming. No more mourning, no more silent acceptance. I picked up my phone, thumb hovering for a moment, before typing a single message to Shanda. "It's time." I stepped out of the truck and onto the gravel, the stones crunching softly underfoot. Above me, the first drops of rain splashed onto the driveway, cold and insistent. I lifted my face to the sky, letting it wash over me. I wasn't going to defend myself anymore. I was going to expose every lie, every theft, every carefully polished facade they built on top of the ruins of what they stole. The house might have been theirs on paper, but the truth was mine. The envelope was already torn when Mrs. Peterson from next door handed it to me, her face puckered with something like guilt. "It got mixed up with mine," she said, voice soft over the humid air. The paper inside was damp, but the ink was still sharp, still cutting. My name wasn't there. Instead, the legal wording listed my father as the seller, Carol's fiancé as the buyer. The deed was clean, final. My heart stopped when I realized there was no mention of me anywhere in the documents. No clause protecting my work, my investment, my life inside that house. It wasn't just emotional anymore. It was permanent, legal, final. My hands shook as I gripped the paper tighter, feeling the sharp edges bite into my skin. A storm was coming, the heavy heat pressing down, making it harder to breathe. It crackled through the air, a warning I should have heeded weeks ago. I didn't bother calling ahead. I drove straight to my parents' house, tires spitting gravel when I jerked into their driveway. The porch light was already on, casting a warm glow that belied the coldness waiting for me. My father sat in his favorite chair, a glass of sweet tea sweating in his hand. He looked up, blinking slowly like I was a passing car, instead of his daughter standing at the edge of his porch with betrayal dripping from her hands. I held up the documents. "You sold it," I said, voice barely more than a whisper. He shrugged, the smallest lift of his shoulders, like I had asked him about the weather. "It's just a house, Dar. You can find another." The words struck harder than any slap. Just a house. Just a life I had poured into wood and nails, memory and sweat. Just a home I had resurrected when everyone else gave up. The invisible line that had started cracking under my feet finally split wide open. We were no longer family pretending at dysfunction. We were strangers wearing familiar faces. I backed away slowly, the papers crumpling in my hand. Later, sitting in the parking lot outside the coffee shop where Shanda worked weekends, I called Colleen. My voice broke explaining the documents. She didn't hesitate. Within hours, she called back, her voice low and grim. "The contract your dad signed? It's bad, Dare. It gives Carol's people everything. He didn't even negotiate, didn't even read it. Carol pushed him to sign under the protect the family excuse." The realization tasted bitter on my tongue. It wasn't just Carol's manipulation, it was my father's negligence. The same man who taught me how to patch drywall and change a tire had casually signed away everything that mattered to me because it was easier than listening to his daughter fight for herself. I sat in my truck long after the call ended, watching the rain hammer the windshield in relentless sheets. I thought about all the times my father stood behind me, guiding my hand as I hammered crooked nails into scrap wood, teaching me how to build, how to believe. I thought about how easily he had helped tear it all down. The tears came then, hot and furious, carving silent tracks down my cheeks. I wasn't crying because I lost the house. I cried because I had lost the myth I built around the people I loved. The lightning split the sky, a jagged crack of white fire. In the reflection of the cracked windshield, I saw my face, not broken, not defeated, but sharpened into something harder, something clear. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Shanda. "No more warnings. They made their choice. Time to fight for what's mine." I slipped the phone into my pocket, opened the truck door, and stepped out into the storm without hesitation. Charleston buzzed with an energy that clung to everything like the thick May humidity. For once, it wasn't just the heat pressing down on me. It was the weight of whispers, invisible but suffocating. It started small. A tilted glance at the grocery store, a muttered comment at the gas station. Didn't she lose her house because she mismanaged it? The words floated toward me as I passed two women I had once considered acquaintances. Their smiles tightened the moment they realized I heard them. I didn't stop walking, but something sharp twisted in my chest. At first I told myself it was just gossip, small-town noise with no anchor, but it kept happening, over and over, until even the way the cashier at the diner looked at me felt like judgment, until the invitations stopped and the polite nods at church turned into sidelong glances and silence. It wasn't just the house they were taking from me. They were stealing the ground I stood on. I sat on the cracked vinyl booth at the back of Shanda's diner, stirring coffee I had no intention of drinking. She slid into the seat across from me, her mouth tight. "You need to see this," she said, flipping her phone around. Screenshots glared up at me. Posts from Mara's social media, vague but damning. Some people can't manage what they're given and blame everyone else when it falls apart. Sad. The words weren't addressed to me by name, but they didn't have to be. Everyone knew. Mara, the girl who once braided my hair, the girl who swore we'd be sisters forever, was now cutting me down in the town square. I scrolled further, bile rising in my throat. Just because you lived there doesn't mean you deserved it. I handed the phone back with a hand that trembled slightly. "She's smearing me," I said, the words tasting foreign and bitter. "She's trying to erase what's left." Shanda hesitated, biting her lip. "There's more," she said, voice low. "Colleen wants to meet." Colleen, Warren's sister, met me later that afternoon at the small diner on the edge of town, the one nobody from the center ever bothered to visit. She wore sunglasses and a baseball cap, but she still looked over her shoulder twice before sliding into the booth. "I shouldn't be doing this," she said without preamble, "but you deserve to know." I waited, heart thudding. "Carol paid Mara," she said simply. It wasn't just anger or loyalty. There was money involved. She paid her to post those things, to spread them. My stomach dropped. I wasn't just betrayed. I was bought. Colleen slid a thumb drive across the table, her fingers brushing mine in a silent apology. "There's a recording," she said. "Mara bragging about it at a party. Use it if you want." She left before I could even say thank you. I sat there, staring at the thumb drive like it might burn a hole straight through the table. The weight of it pressed down on my lungs, heavier than anything I had carried before. Not just loss, not just betrayal. A transaction. I was a transaction. The old instinct to curl inward, to stay quiet and survive, reared its head. But silence had never saved anyone. I thought of every memory they stole, every lie they told, every lock they changed to keep me out of my own story. And I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. I pulled my notebook from my bag, flipping to a blank page. At the top, in sharp, steady letters, I wrote, "Names." Underneath it, "Evidence." And then, "Connections." I built my list with the calm precision of someone framing a house, beam by beam, refusing to leave a single weak point. I stared at the list until the letters blurred, until the fear melted into something cleaner, sharper. "Time to remind them who they underestimated," I whispered. The storm was already gathering, and this time I wasn't planning to wait it out. The air smelled of wet pavement and expensive perfume as I stepped into the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung heavy overhead, casting too bright light on two wide smiles. The annual spring gala, the event where everyone who mattered in Charleston came to preen and whisper. Tonight it would be more than that. I clutched my small clutch bag tighter, feeling the sharp edges of the documents inside pressing against my palm. My armor. My proof. Across the room I spotted Carol. She stood near the stage, dressed in a pale blue gown, laughing easily with Warren and my parents. She looked every bit the perfect daughter, the community sweetheart. My stomach twisted, but I didn't let it show. Shanda brushed my arm lightly as she passed, her glance brief but steady. We were ready. Colleen lingered near the refreshment table, blending into the crowd, her posture casual but watchful. There was no going back now. Carol's name was called, and the room burst into polite applause. She glided onto the stage, accepting a gold plaque that gleamed under the lights. She took the microphone with practiced ease. "I stand here tonight," she began, her voice sweet and steady, "not just for myself, but for the values my family instilled in me: responsibility, resilience, commitment to community." I felt the first sting as she pivoted seamlessly into a veiled attack. "Sometimes," she said, her smile so kind it made my skin crawl, "those who can't uphold those values find themselves lost, blaming others, creating chaos. It's heartbreaking to see, but it only strengthens my resolve to lead by example." A few heads in the audience turned toward me. Not many, but enough. She was rewriting history right in front of them. My pulse hammered in my ears, but my hands stayed steady. When the applause started again, I moved. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't wait for the music to swell or for some grand cue. I simply walked onto the stage. There was a collective ripple, a held breath from the crowd. Carol froze, her perfect smile faltering for the first time all night. I took the microphone from her hand with a gentleness that was almost cruel. "Thank you, Carol," I said, voice carrying clear through the cavernous room, "for reminding us all how important truth really is." I reached into my bag and pulled out the documents, one by one, holding them up for the room to see. "Truth," I said, "like these letters, forged by Carol to file false complaints against me." A gasp. "Truth," I continued, "like the testimony of those she paid to spread lies about me in this community." Murmurs now, louder. I turned to face the audience fully. "And truth," I said, voice unwavering, "like the contracts she manipulated my father into signing, stripping away a house rebuilt with my own hands." Carol moved toward me, but Warren grabbed her arm. hissing something under his breath. I held up one last sheet. "And finally," I said, letting the weight of the moment settle. "The recording, provided by someone who could no longer stomach the lies. A recording of Carol orchestrating this entire scheme for financial gain and personal revenge." Silence, long and heavy. Then, slowly, people began to move, not toward me, away from Carol. My parents stood stiffly, expressions carved from stone. My mother's eyes flickered to the floor. My father's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking in his cheek. Carol's face drained of color. She turned sharply, shrugging off Warren's hand, and stormed out of the ballroom, the doors swinging wildly behind her. For a moment, I stood there alone, the stage lights far too hot against my skin. Victory didn't taste sweet. It tasted like ash. I stepped down from the stage, the crowd parting silently to let me pass, and walked out into the cool, waiting night. The night after the gala was still, thick with the scent of blooming magnolias, the world holding its breath in the humid Charleston air. I drove home alone, the key, my key, heavy in my palm, cutting faint grooves into my skin. No crowds waited. No neighbors stood on porches offering smiles or congratulations. Just the sound of my own tires crunching gravel, the headlights casting long, lonely shadows across the familiar, battered porch. I stepped into the quiet house, the door creaking softly on its hinges. The walls seemed taller somehow, echoing with a silence that wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. It was morning. I pressed my back to the door once it closed behind me, the weight of everything I'd fought for finally pressing down. This was mine, but it didn't feel like victory. 2 days later, the official documents arrived by courier. The envelope was thick, embossed with the bland authority of a law office. Inside, a single sheet confirmed it. My parents had signed over the house to me. No letter, no note, no apology. Just 2 signatures, cold and final, inked beneath my name. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the paper. The fan above creaked in lazy, uneven circles, stirring the warm air without cooling it. I thought there would be triumph, relief, maybe even a flicker of pride. Instead, I felt only an ache so deep it pressed against my ribs. I had won. I had lost. The days stretched out, slow and heavy. I checked my phone more times than I would ever admit, waiting for a text, a voicemail, even a message sent out of obligation. Nothing came. The town buzzed around me, oblivious or pretending to be. News travels fast here, but real loyalty moves slower, if it moves at all. One evening, I ran into Mrs. Peterson at the grocery store. She gave me a tight smile, the kind you give to a ghost you think you maybe recognize but aren't quite sure you should acknowledge. Her hands fluttered nervously around the cans of green beans, her voice bright and brittle. "Such a shame about everything, dear, but you know, family has to stick together." I smiled, small and polite, and left my basket half full on the floor. Later that night, alone in the living room, I traced my fingers over the old scratches on the wood floor. Here, where I had dropped a hammer rebuilding the threshold. There, where the Christmas tree stand had gouged the surface during the year when everything had felt perfect, even if it wasn't. These scars were mine, proof of my existence, stubborn and undeniable. The house didn't feel like a home yet, not really. It felt like a wound healing slowly from the inside out. Maybe that was enough for now. In the backyard, beneath the stretch of stars half hidden by the heavy summer air, I dug a small hole near the fence line. My hands worked steadily, the soil cool and damp against my skin. I planted a single magnolia sapling. It would take years before it grew tall enough to cast real shade. Maybe it never would. But it was a beginning. I sat back on my heels, brushing the dirt from my palms, and whispered into the warm night. Some things you lose. Some things you build yourself. I stood, stretching the ache from my bones, and walked back to the house that bore my scars, my sweat, my stubborn heart. This time, when I locked the door behind me, it wasn't to keep the world out. It was to protect what I had fought to reclaim. Looking back, if there's one thing this journey taught me, it's that sometimes the greatest battles we fight are not with strangers, but with the very people we once called home. Choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish, it makes you brave. In a world where loyalty is often bought and truth twisted, standing firm for your own worth is the loudest act of courage. Maybe you've been there too, feeling like a guest in your own life, wondering if you're strong enough to start over. I promise, you are. Home isn't built with bricks or bloodlines, it's built with resilience, with every scar you refuse to hide and every dream you dare to protect. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from something or someone you once thought was forever? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a 1-inch in the comments if this touched your heart, or tell me where you're watching from. If you didn't connect with this video, let me know why. I welcome your thoughts and your voice. If this story moved you even a little, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss the next one. Because every story has a home. And maybe, just maybe, you're ready to build yours too.